All right. Hey, thanks, Karen. And thank you for all of you for showing up today in the middle of December here. I'm Kevin O'Connor, and today I'm going to be covering more from a functional side, page and field configurator, as well as drop zones. And really focusing on how to reduce customizations using our delivered tools. And again, my name is Kevin O'Connor. I'm a senior principal product manager in Oracle Higher Education Development. Primarily, my focus is student records as a product manager and admissions, as well as some of the other, enterprise components, not necessarily the lead product manager, but they are areas that I have a lot of interest in and have focused on. So, and we'll walk through some of the different tools that we've delivered over the past several years. So welcome. So before we get started, just want to show our safe harbor statement, because there are a couple of items that I will be talking about today that are future facing that have not been delivered yet. So the safe harbor statement covers that, that we have the discretion to change those before they're released. So anyway, I think you've had enough time to read that exciting statement. So let's go ahead and just jump right in, because we don't have a ton of time, and talk about the first item is drop zones. And so for those of you who are not familiar with what a drop zone is, and I'm going to keep the slides to a minimum, but there is some text on these slides, so bear with me. But the majority of my presentation today will be a live demo. But just to kind of level set, so the benefits of drop zones, what they are. So drop zones, minimize the ongoing maintenance costs of customizing either Fluid or Classic Plus pages in Campus Solutions, or, the other pillars in PeopleSoft. The content that you actually provide or include in drop zones, it's in line with the delivered prompt fields, and it's context sensitive. So you'll see in a few minutes how the embedding of the drop zones on the pages, how they actually just are transparent to the user, and they would never know that they're actually customized or your content. Any record or field included in the drop zone becomes part of the component buffer, and the content fits seamlessly, and like I said before, is indistinguishable from delivered content on the page. That's the beauty of this, is that when you're producing a customization for a page or various components, you may have to do a bolt-on, you may have to add another section on a page that, not necessarily flows with the exact delivered content. So this is actually indistinguishable from delivered content. They really minimize, and that's kind of the focus today, is really minimizing ongoing maintenance costs of customizing, especially in this case, Fluid pages, which I'll be showing you. And then when you run the compare reports, it really considers the changes to be configurations rather than customizations. So configuration is a big key, especially as we look forward into the future. Especially into cloud applications, configuration is really the way to go. And I've been really focused over the last several years since I came into Campus Solutions on configuration rather than customization. And this really parlays right into that. Saving the Fluid or Classic page data, it also saves the drop zones custom content. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that's accomplished. You can use them to embed custom content directly on a transaction page, rather than placing the content, let's say, in a separate window or a related content frame. It's embedded right within that transaction page. Campus Solutions is why we're all here today. Campus Solutions has actually delivered drop zones for multiple Fluid self-service pages, and I'm going to show you and talk about those in a moment. And they really give more options to have, you guys meet all of your business needs while minimizing the cost of customizations. And then, of course, starting with People Tools 857, Dropzones lets you add new fields, capture additional data, and it really doesn't impact or affect the life cycle management of your campus solutions application. So what did we, how do we do this? Like, how do we configure a drop zone? And most of this hopefully will become very clear when I walk through the demo and show you exactly how this is accomplished. You create your custom Fluid content. I'm just going to use Fluid as an example. You can use an existing subpage, or you create a new one. And you really, you just have to identify the drop zone that you want to use. The key here is that we deliver the drop zones. So we go in and deliver those through our PUM images, and we identify the pages that they're added to. It's probably safer to use the ones we have. If you have a really hotshot developer, then they can do that themselves. But I recommend just kind of doing the ones that we have at the beginning here, so you guys get used to that. I won't go into all this, but you preview the page, you configure the drop zones, select the component, which I'm going to walk through all these steps in a live demo. And then you, of course, search for either your custom subpage or something we've delivered. And of course, you have to test to make sure that everything's working as expected. Now, obviously, there's more to it than meets the eye, because there are pieces that you have to code behind the scenes to ensure that the data is saved when you save the component. So we'll walk through that a bit. So where have we added drop zones to Campus Solutions? So we've made an effort over the last several PUM images in some of the different self-service Fluid areas. Campus community, so you can see that we've delivered, what's that, about 9 different drop zones: personal, biographic, emergency contacts, etc. Right? You can see those. In student records, we recently delivered drop zones for course history, grades, the new milestone component that was added in PUM 27, and in the apply for graduation enhancement that was done for Fluid. Financial aid under award summary, accept decline, and then the cost of attendance page. And admissions, we added drop zones to the application status page. Here's where the safe harbor comes in. PI 28, PUM image 28, which is a future delivery. It's coming soon. We're adding drop zones to view my classes, enrollment appointments, shopping cart, class search, which is really the main landing page for class search, and the Fluid course search, which is the main landing page as well. So that's what we have on tap for 28. As we move forward, of course, we'll identify additional pages to add these drop zones to, but we're trying to check off a lot of the pages that are used. Now, the reason it's focused on Fluid is because, drop zones primarily focus in the Fluid arena and Classic Plus. We don't deliver Classic Plus pages, but we, of course, deliver Fluid pages, and so that's the focus there. Now, this is like an eye chart. Now, the only reason I put this here is because it's really just an example of, and I'll explain some of this in a little bit in the live demo, but recently on the listserv, there was there were a couple of posts regarding, I've added our custom subpage, we're capturing data, we loaded it into the drop zones that Oracle delivered, but the data is not saving. So I added this so that we can kind of talk about that a bit. In summary, basically, we've got our sample code. This is our drop zone area. In this example is apply for graduation. We're capturing 2 pieces of data. Are you attending the commencement, and what's the number of tickets that you would like? The code is going to require, the subpage is going to require some people code. And in this case, there's a field change people code to save the data for when the student slides the attending commencement to yes. There's people code involved to update or create a record for that data for that student. And then, of course, the number of tickets, again, same thing, field change, on that field. We're going to save the data, and it does require people code. So it's just kind of in response to yes, I do read the listserv posts, and I do see the questions that come through on that. And so it's definitely something you guys need to do in order to save your data. Here's another example. Here's the drop zone. And typically what we're doing is we're adding drop zones to the top and the bottom of our pages that we're delivering them on. Now, that's not always the case, and I'll talk about that just real briefly. There are a couple of page constructs in the future release that we're only going to be delivering a top drop zone. And we'll call that out in the release notes for PUM image 28. But regardless of that, let's talk a little bit about, we're adding top and we're adding bottom. As you can see, we have kind of placeholders to those drop zones. And in this case, in this milestones example, you'll notice this is only a sample drop zone, okay? We're displaying Apple ID and name. This does not require people code. So when you put a drop zone in that is displaying data and doesn't require saving, so you're just putting data so the student can see something that you want them to see that's not necessarily in the component that you're working with. Add that to the drop zone. There's no people code required on that. In this case, I'll show you this live, but we added just an example of you maybe adding a note, a rich text editor to a page. When you save the note, of course, there's a field change people code. So when you hit that save note, it's going to save the data right in the record that you're creating. And then the record layout, in this case, since all the keys exist, the page will load automatically. There's no need to add people code to that. So anyway, it's a little technical, but I wanted to just kind of show you, some different examples. Display only doesn't require it. If you're saving data, it does. So here's a use case that I'm going to show you live, but I think may come into play. And I think it's a really good example for how powerful a drop zone can be. So as you can see, this is the fluid class search. I have Art 112, I've searched for, I've got 4 sections that are offered. Here's all the data. But, one of the things that hasn't been available and could be in the future is the student being able to see their current schedule as they look at their class search courses. So as you can see, I've highlighted that this is a drop zone that we added. And now this drop zone, you can add different bits of data, right? So in this case, we added, and this is just an example. This is not being delivered to you. It's just an example. But as a use case, you could put the student's current schedule right above that class search selection so that the student can search and then look at their current schedule so that they're selecting classes a little more efficiently. Anyway, I'm going to show you that live in a few minutes. All right, so because I like to do more live demos, let's go ahead and jump in there and let's look at the drop zone configuration and then what they look like in the system. Cool. So the first thing we're going to do is, obviously I have my drop zone because I've been working on them in my recently visited, but let's go ahead and look at the navigation. Someone on your technical or development staff is going to have access to. So obviously on your campuses, you have your own process to get access to certain pages. But for this purpose, of course, I have access to everything, but we're going to go to People Tools, Portal, and at the very bottom is Configure Drop Zones. Okay, so I'm going to put in that milestones component, and we're going to do a search. And I'll show you without doing that kind of what it looks like. Let me do that first because there's a big distinction here between what you're seeing. And of course, it's going to pull back all, in this case, SSR components. And notice in the search results that it will tell you what has been configured or not, right? So notice that here's all of our different SSR components, and a lot of them obviously are not configured, okay? So as we go down, but it will tell you which ones are configured. So that's one, tip to do that. But in my opinion, it's just better to know what you want to work with and work with those components directly so you don't make any mistakes, right? So in this case, I'm going to show you the example I showed you in the PowerPoint, but it's pretty straightforward how to activate these drop zones, okay? So we, Oracle, are delivering the drop zones on these components. Of course, you saw where it says configured, right? So if it's not configured, it's going to say no, and you're not going to be able to work with those. If it's configured, then you'll have access to enter your subpages. Now, in this case, of course, I'm going to be able to search on, all the different subpages, but not all subpages are necessarily usable or going to be used for these drop zones. So I recommend ensuring that when you actually create these subpages for the drop zones, name them very easily searchable. And then, of course, we have a drop zone bottom, we have a drop zone top tester, and you just enter it, enter your subpage, and then, of course, you can save that. Configuration's been saved, and then we can go and look at the various pieces, which we'll do in a sec. So, so that's pretty straightforward because we're delivering the bulk of what you need, right? So we're delivering the app designer, the pages are fixed up with the drop zones, they're configured, and you just simply need to add your own content. Should be pretty straightforward. Okay, and then of course, I listed all the different drop zones out there, and we'll come back in to look at some other stuff, but let's go ahead and look at a student and what they see and how this all kind of flows. So the first one I want to look at is the application for graduation, okay? And this is the same as the example I gave in the PowerPoint, but we're going to quickly walk through this just so you can kind of see where this fits in, right? So see this additional information step? This is basically a drop zone, and you guys can enter whatever data or add whatever data you want here. And so I know that over time, as I've talked with customers, there's a need to add various bits of information that you'd like to gather from students for graduation. And that's what we've given you the option to do. So I'm just going to navigate down to that page, not making any changes here. Oops. Oh, come on. There we go. All right. So here is the drop zone page, right? So we call it out. This is only a sample drop zone. And here's those two fields that we saw earlier. So notice that when I click yes, that people code fired to save this data because it's a field change people code. And the same for, oops, it's the same for the number of tickets. So when I actually leave this field, it's going to save into the database because the people code is doing that for the system. So really seamless, it's easy. Students would understand exactly what's here. It's, they're not going to know that this is not delivered content. And then of course you can just move on and submit if you'd like. So that's the grad application example. And now we're going to look at the milestones. So in this case, earlier I added the subpage for the top, and that's basically what this data is right here, right? So it's similar to some of the examples I used before. Just a sample, we put an EMPL ID and a name. That's just displaying. But at the bottom, you can get very, very creative as far as what you add in these drop zones. And I think this is kind of cool. If you want to capture a node or whatever it is, right? This is literally just a simple example. But when I save this note, bingo, see the spinning circle. That means it's saving that data that I just made to the database. You can play around with that. And again, a drop zone enables you to do whatever you want in the system that we don't deliver, right? Because we don't deliver everything, but it really gives you a lot of power. Okay. And then, of course, we've delivered across several of the components here, including grades. So we added drop zones to the top and bottom. So, we put those out there first just so everyone gets their feet wet. And then we've added 2 more of the transactional pages in the next release. But I do want to show you in action what I think is a very cool feature. And don't worry about the data in here. It's just a development database. So if you see some strange things, that's why. All right. So here's the real life example of adding. So we have our classes that we've searched, show my current schedule, and bingo, right? So now I'm able to review, okay, so 10 o'clock, nope, I already have a class. 7 to 7:50 is kind of late, but I can do it. And Friday works, but Monday doesn't work, right? So now as a student, I'm able to actually more efficiently select my classes instead of having to go all the way to the end of the activity guide and then be told, oh, sorry, you have a time conflict, right? So this example, I think, is really a powerful example to be able to add into the system. So simple examples, but I think that as we move forward, we'll come up with more ideas, more pages, and enable these drop zones through on more pages. But I think for right now, we've opened up quite a few, and you guys can use those in whatever manner you want. So that kind of takes me to the end of the drop zone section. I really don't want to take questions yet, only because, and I don't know how many are out there, but I want to make sure that we cover the page and field configurator. And so I'm just going to pop out of here, get ready for my next section, which is page and field configurator. Benefits of page and field configurator, I'll call it PFC. So PFC is a feature delivered by PeopleSoft for the configuration, again, keyword, of certain pages and fields, classic or fluid pages, based on your requirements, right? You can do modifications like hide fields, modify labels, disable fields, put a default value in for a field, disable a page based on conditions, and we'll talk about conditions and criteria, without ever using App Designer. Okay, so this is I've said this before and I've gotten eyebrows raised, but this is a functional tool. Now, not everyone agrees with that. It's a functional tool with extreme power and extreme need for access control, but it is a functional tool. PFC does not affect the original page in Application Designer whatsoever. So again, how beautiful, when I worked on the campus like you guys, how many times did we want to change a label because it didn't make sense to our students, or we want to hide tabs on components because we don't use them or they're confusing. or we want to gray out fields or make them disabled because we don't want someone to make a mistake, right? So we're going to see all that in a couple of minutes. You can have multiple configurations for the same component based on a user role or criteria with each transaction. And I'll show you what I mean by that. One user can see something that's completely different than another user, all controlled by either user access or criteria access. Now, Page and Field Configurator, PFC, it supports two types of configurations. And the standard is what I talked about a second ago. So hiding a field, etc. But we also have a masking configuration. So you could literally mask any field in the system so that whatever it is, right? And not having to use, you're not using DDA, you're using this masking configuration. You can hide someone's name, you can hide address, you can hide all kinds of things using the masking configuration. Again, that's a powerful piece of functionality that's really opened up, in my opinion, some incredible advancements, because a lot of times those are modifications like, oh, I don't want someone to see that field, or I don't want someone to see the data in that field. Let's say a student worker, you don't want them to see certain data, mask it for them, but only them. Your other users can see it. So anyway, I think you get what I mean, but I'll show you in real time what that looks like. Again, eye chart, but you'll have this, I'll make sure that you have this, and so you can see the different pieces and controls. So label text, you can modify labels, hide fields, disable entry, setting a value to blank. Now, there are some notes here that give you some parameters around what you can do. So, for example, the set value to blank can be checked only if the hide field or disable entry is selected for that field. Also, set value to blank can be used only if the sequence has criteria. So, based on some of the rules that you input, then it will be valid. If not, then it won't be valid. In addition to that, we have, you can require data in a field, or you can put default values in. And you'll see, I have an example of that. And then select system variables. So you can, there's a system variable now where you can say, at time, at date, or whatever, the different system values are, so that it's driven from those system variables. Again, sorry for the eye chart, but I just want to make sure that you understand what's going on here. So there really are 5 steps to configure data masking, and you define the profile, define field groups with similar masking requirements. That's not necessarily required. In Page and Field Configurator, you configure the fields to be masked using masking profiles. Define the list of users to whom the configuration needs to be applied using the user list page, which you'll see. And then everything you do in Page and Field Configurator has to be mapped to the portal registry. Okay, that is really key, and we'll see that in action. Now, that wasn't too bad, right? Not too many eye charts. So let's go ahead and jump into a live demo and see what I've been talking about. Where is the Page and Field Configurator located? So right here in Enterprise Components, under, look at that, Page and Field Configuration and the Page and Field Configurator. Now you're going to see when I hit search, obviously I was doing some various testing, so you'll see several that are configured, but I'm only going to show you a couple of examples here. The first example I'm going to show you is in class data. So this, for those of you who are familiar, this is really the maintain schedule of classes component. Okay, so that's really critical that you have to know the component you're working with in order to make this happen. And again, getting access to this component, Page and Field Configurator, you're just going to have to work with whatever the policies are on your campus. But again, this is a functional task, and you'll see that. Now, this page is a little busy, right? So there's a lot of information here, but let's walk through everything. You have to give a description. Now, I'm going to skip over the criteria for a second. I'm going to come back to that. There's a comment field, so you can actually add, this is new functionality. You can add a comment. Hey, this is because our history department puts the wrong session codes in, or they don't have access to anything except for regular sessions, or whatever it is, so that you remember exactly why you made this change. This select fields button, I'm going to spend a few moments here because this is really critical. This is where you select the fields from the pages that you want to impact. Okay. Now, there's a couple of sections here that are critical. Notice that there are 60 fields, page fields, that are attached to this primary page, class schedule entry. That's the first page of this component. You want to know how many pages there are? There are 13 pages. Some are work pages, so you never see them. But the first 9 are visible to the user that can be impacted by page and field configurator. Okay. Every time I change, and this is highly critical, and this is where I've had to help users quite a bit. Let's say I want to change something on the class notes page. Notice that I selected class notes. Okay, remember how many fields we had here? 60 for the first page. You have to hit search in order for those fields to be impacted by your change here. Now you notice we're at 25 fields, okay? And of course, viewing all is really critical. That way you don't have to do too many, you're not using the arrow to navigate, and or use find, right? So you can search for a specific field that you're interested in. So really critical. These are the pages in the component. Obviously every component is different. Let's go back. I'm going to change it back. Notice it changed to 60. And these are all the various fields that are available. Now, I've already pre-selected the session code as a use case to say the field or the subject area, in this case, our history department, they don't use other sessions. Again, this is just theoretical, but they don't use other sessions except for regular session, which is the default value of 1. That's why I put that we're going to disable entry, and we're going to default 1, which is equal to regular session, in for only the subject area of history. Now, notice I have 2 rows here. You can literally have as many rows here as you want with different criteria. I can apply them additively, meaning that as I enter a component, the system's going to analyze additively all of the criteria based on who I am and what I'm searching for. I'm just going to keep it simple here. In this case, sequence 1 is for the subject area of history. Sequence 2 is this. For the subject area of econ, notice that my field properties are completely different. I'm going to change the label text on a bunch of things. I'm going to disable entry of the start and end date on the page. So I don't like the label for class section, so I changed it to section of class, section type for component. And the link to the CAF values, which are class association details, well, I've changed that label to additional class details. Okay, so very powerful. If I want to hide fields, boom, you can hide them here. Disable entry, set them to blank, make it a required field if that's possible within App Designer. And then, of course, default value, which we saw in the first example. Something we haven't talked about yet is the configure page visibility. I can now hide tabs, right? So in the past, you had to go in and make a customization for which tabs are visible to users. So now I can just come in and say, I don't really want to see the enrollment control. I don't want this in the econ area. If I'm using this subject area to see LMS control or class notes. I'm making them not visible. I could also make them, let's say for the exam page, I want to make it visible, but I want to display only. Okay. And I'm going to save that, validate my configuration. All right. So I got to move quick here. User list, really critical. This is how you control the access, right? So right now I've selected the option for selected users. So if you only want selected users to see these changes, you can do that. Or you want everybody to see these changes except for specific roles or specific users. A single role with exceptions. Okay, so meaning I only want a single role to see this. So let's say you have a student worker role. That's where you would say, hey, this student worker role will see these. Everybody else sees the delivered page, or specific roles with exceptions, right? So multiple roles. This is one, this is multiple. And then you can even do this at the sequence level. So remember before we saw that we have two sequences? I can drill down and determine who sees these at a sequence level as well, right? So it's the same options, but at a sequence level. For this example, I'm just going to show at the header level. I've said that my PS user is the only one who can see these, and bingo, we're good. Earlier, I talked about it's required to map to the portal registry. Now, I've already done this, but I can do it again. Okay, so you will see either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 entries in the portal registry. Make sure they're all selected. Apply your configuration, and done. You're done. Advanced options. If there are hundreds and hundreds of fields, but you only want your users to be able to work with 10, you can actually come in and determine which 10 fields that your users can see. This is a new option. When they work with the page configuration, they would only see 10 fields. So it's pretty powerful, but it does take some time to determine that. All right, so remember this, and we're going to jump back in here and see this in a second. So remember in the history, we see the session code, and we have a couple of pages that we have display only for textbook, and we're going to blank out the GL tab because we just don't care about the GL tab. Now, for lack of time, I'm going to just jump over and let's make sure we save everything we've done here and look at maintain schedule classes. Well, look at there. I've got history ready for. Okay. So notice this. When I add another row here, because I'm using the history subject area, notice my session field is blanked out, so it's disabled, and I have a 1 because I told the system to put a 1 there as a default value. This way you can lock down the data that you're actually allowing your users to put in various fields, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Now remember, let's see, textbook, I made this just display only, okay? So I can't make any changes here. And then remember that funny old GL tab that was there? It's gone because I hid that for this particular subject. Now, so pretty straightforward, but let's jump over and look at econ. Because this is really going to show the power of this feature. Okay, so remember what we did. I changed the label, section of class, section type. I disabled start and end date. Okay, so that can't be changed once it's determined by your session that you've added. And then I changed the label type to additional class details. Okay, and it's really easy. And I think I did, and I hid a couple of things, and I made the exam page display only. Okay, because you may give different departments the access to different things, and you can control that through the security. Now here, I've added some related actions here so that we can come back and quickly see. Whoops, I don't want to see that one. Then we can quickly see again, start and end dates, component, start date, and then additional areas. And then these are the pages that we made visible or invisible and controlled that way. If I wanted to add another field, but I'm kind of running out of time a little bit, if I want to add another field, I literally come in, select a field, add it, bingo, validate my configuration, and that field is now updated on the page that we're working on. But in lieu of time, I'm going to go ahead and just close this. But notice the use of another underutilized tool is this related content, related actions, right? So if I'm, in that area where I'm working with this, it's so easy just to pop it up where you don't have to leave the component and it all sits right on top in a modal window for you to use. So anyway, that's more of an aside than anything. And let's see. So let's look at a masking example, because I think that's really, really critical as well. There we go. Let's quickly look for Mr. Chingas. Okay, so we're going to look at his, and I based the masking. I don't know if you noticed that in the criteria, but I based the masking on the program, okay, that I am working in. So again, very finite control over how the data displays. So notice I came in under liberal arts and none of this data is masked, okay? Date of birth, but I hid some fields, I hid marriage data, and again, the use case is really up to you guys how you want to handle this and who the users are. If you want student workers to only see certain things, hide everything except for what you want them to work on. It reduces mistakes dramatically. So I picked LAU, but let's look at Jesse's fine arts application, okay? So we're going to pop back and pull up his fine arts application and bingo. Now you can see the power of what I just did. Based on my program, I'm masking the date of birth, just the day and the year, the month and date. I'm showing the year. I unhid marital status, gender. I'm allowing access to this national ID type, but I'm masking the national ID, and I'm masking all of the phone data here as well. You could mask the address, you could mask pretty much anything you want, the email address, not that you'd want to do that, but if you want to mask phone numbers, boom, simple, based on the program that you've selected. And then notice this birth information for LAU. I changed that link to drumroll, birth details, right? So it's really simple to change the look and feel of the system. So I've actually combined two items here. I combined a masking configuration along with a standard configuration so that both items are working in tandem, okay? And I guess the last item that I'd like to just show you real quick, I've masked on the student side. It's actually not that big of a deal, but since I did it, I just want to show you. You can mask, in the fluid area. I actually put a little star here under the student's grades because maybe you don't want them to see their grades. Again, funny example, but just wanted to show you that you can actually mask data directly in contact with the students, their view as well. So I just put a little star under grade. And that way, that way the, you can control kind of what they see. Well, that brings us to the end of today's presentation. I'd like to thank you all for attending and have a great day. Thank you.